When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Football 24/7. The free agency frenzy has started. Johnny Mac, Eagles breaking news early. They extend Landon Dickerson to a massive contract extension, 4 years, $84 million. We'll see what the terms are as they come out later. John, what's your first takeaways from this extension and perhaps the fallout or what's next for the Eagles?
Yeah, no surprise. I mean, obviously, Landon Dickerson has played at a very high level, 2 Pro Bowls in his first 3 seasons. As a second-round pick, they don't have the luxury of that option year as they do with Devonte Smith from that 2021 draft. So it's no surprise that he got done first because of that reason. 4 years, $84 million, as you mentioned. These things tend to be less impressive when they're actually filed and you see the real deal. But right now, highest paid guard in the history of football from an average annual value standpoint, second in guarantees. He got about $50 million in guarantees to Quentin Nelson. So very good deal for Landon Dickerson. The cap keeps going up, so that's how it works. He's the latest guard. He'll have that record for a little bit, and then somebody will surpass him. But certainly the top of that 2021 draft is looking really good for Howie Roseman when you talk about Devonte Smith and Landon Dickerson. And, yeah, he's really important. The Eagles don't want to mess with that left side of Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata. And now, you know, you can argue that's the strength of their team. Cam Jurgens will be moving the center. You still have Lane Johnson. You got to figure out right guard. Also, though, Xander, you know, last year TJ Edwards was the first domino to fall. This year it's DeAndre Swift. So DeAndre going to Chicago, 3 years, $24 million. No guaranteed money yet, but early indications that's a little bit more than I think most expected for DeAndre Swift, and that should help the running back market a little bit. And, you know, this stuff with Saquon Barkley is fascinating to me because the Eagles' interest in him is real. They typically don't want to pay running backs in their history, obviously their recent history. So they're either paying a lot of deference to Kell Moore, who perhaps wants that receiving threat in the backfield, and we'll see how things shake out with Saquon Barkley. Houston is involved as well. Probably willing to go a little bit higher from what I was told than the Eagles. So it'll come down to Saquon really want to play in Philadelphia with the Penn State pedigree, New York kid, stay in the Northeast. Who knows? But Houston's a good football team, obviously coming off a playoff season with a very young quarterback, seem to be an ascending team. D'Amico Ryans, no state taxes. That's always a big deal with the Texas team. So they have some advantages as well. But that one to me is just utterly, as I said, fascinating because that is not typical of the way the Eagles do business. And it tells you a couple things in that, not only the Kellen Moore aspect, but also the evaluation of the player. Typically, the Eagles don't go this direction unless they really think a player can help them in both phases, the passing game and the running game. Christian McCaffrey's the guy I always brought up back in 2017. The Eagles were ready to draft him in the first round if he fell, and that would have shocked people. But, yeah, I don't know if he's that type of player, but the Eagles seem to think he's that type of player.
Yeah, just one more question here on Landon Dickerson, and then I'll get your take on this Saquon Barkley and the rumors that are swirling there. I know we had Bob Groats on a couple weeks ago. are you fully anticipating Landon stays at that guard? I know they want to keep that left side together, but does this give them flexibility? I mean, you lose a guy like Jason Kelsey, you got to think, anything's on the table at that point to fill that hole.
Yeah, if Cam falters, certainly they could think about it, but I that's certainly not what they want to do. And the assumption is that Cam Jurgens is going to be just fine at center. I kind of agree with that. That's his natural position. I don't think there's going to be much of an issue. And you've already seen, I always go back to Lane Johnson. When the Eagles drafted Lane Johnson, Jason Peters was still here. The original plan was for Lane to start on the right side, eventually move to the left side to replace Jason Peters. And Jason kept playing and coming back and coming back. And all of a sudden, Lane got so good at right tackle, Jeff Stoutland at one point said, I'm not moving him. He's too good. And I think a similar thing has happened with Landon Dickerson. He's been so good. He's been so good at left guard. Why move him if you don't have to move him? Now, again, if catastrophe strikes, you never say never, but I would say that's very low on the Eagles' list, is to move Landon Dickerson. They really like Dickerson and Jordan Mailata together, and I don't think they want to split that up. Interesting, Jeremy Fowler reporting the Eagles actually attempted to re-sign DeAndre Swift, but Swift went in a different direction. So all the running back talk and that situation. I know DeAndre wasn't necessarily happy with the way he was used in the offense last season. I mentioned that on Birds 365. But, they had a new coordinator. I assume the Eagles were trying to sell him on the fact that the passing game would be a bigger part of it this year. Evidently, it did not work out. So they did attempt to re-sign him, and we'll see if they move on to Saquon Barkley at this point. He also got, forgive me as I scroll through my text message, he also got $15.3 million guaranteed. So 3 years, 24.5 million, $15.3 million of that guaranteed. So pretty good deal for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, and Ian Rappaport puts out he gets 16.5 in first 2 years, an average of 8.25. What does that do for the talk about Saquon Barkley coming to Philadelphia? DeAndre Swift's a great player. He's not Saquon Barkley. If he's making 8.5 or 8.25,
yeah,
what's the number?
And that's why I would think it would go up. And I think Saquon's probably happy with that. And Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, the really high profile names on the running back. Yeah, I think that's a little bit higher than most people expected Swift to go. And that's the rare sort of good news for the running back market as a whole. Because, I think one of the parts of the Eagles' interest of Saquon Barkley is the running back market would be so depressed, maybe they could have a shot at him. And it looks like it's not going to be as depressed as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, dare I say the running back market is returning. But John, I mean, I take your reporting on the Eagles as as good as it's going to get. It's confirmed that they're in on this. So, when you first hear things, you start to see maybe.
And that's, hey, I was the first one. I said that's not the way Howie, and that's why I found it so fascinating. It's anybody who's followed the Eagles knows the way they do business at running back. But I have often pointed out there are exceptions,
right?
And I often point out that 17 draft, they would have drafted Christian McCaffrey because they thought he was an exception. They thought he was a difference maker, and they would have been correct, obviously, in multiple phases. Evidently, they think the same way about Saquon Barkley. I don't know personally if that evaluation is correct, but evidently they think enough of him as a player. Now, I think, we had Jeff Kerr on this morning, who's plugged into Penn State and the NFL as a whole. I think Saquon Barkley coming out of college may have been closer to that, but I don't think he's the same player, and that's what Jeff said today. since the injuries, and if you look at his career numbers, now it's skewed by the fact that he plays behind a poor offensive line, poor quarterback play for most of his career, so that factors into it, no doubt. But
Poor offensive line play too. I mean, that whole
yeah,
team around him is
yeah,
pretty.
the offensive line was atrocious last year, so that definitely factors into it. But he hasn't been the same from if you look at him pre-injury during his rookie year, he's just tremendously explosive. I don't see that same explosion. The Eagles evidently do, though. So that's how they evaluate him, and we'll see. Houston seems to be the other team, as I mentioned, heavily involved, and they have a lot to offer as well, as I mentioned with CJ Stroud, the taxes, the state taxes, and everything.
Yeah, I wonder. When you mentioned Kell Moore, I wonder how much he plays into this. Once upon a time, a couple years ago, Saquon Barkley was looked at in the same light as Christian McCaffrey, who's now dominating with the 49ers. How much of that influence do you think plays into this, and what would you see his role being in this offense?
Well, I think Kellen Moore, I said this is probably deference to Kellen Moore. He does have a history in Dallas of utilizing backs out of the backfield. Now, with the Chargers, it didn't work because Austin Eckler had a down season, was actually much more effective as a receiver pre-Kellen Moore than post-Kellen Moore. But he had some issues as well as far as contract issues, and maybe all the touches over the years started to wear on Austin Eckler. So that probably factored into it. But the philosophy of Kellen Moore wants to get the running back more involved. Perhaps that's why the Eagles were trying to re-sign DeAndre Swift as well in the passing game. And yeah, it's probably deference because this is definitely a change in thinking for the Eagles, no matter what they say.
Right.
Howie'll say he doesn't devalue linebackers either. Yeah, but you do. And your history with running backs is your history with running backs. We're not making it up. And this would be a dramatic sea change from that if they can get something done. But we'll see how it shakes out. McKinney, obviously, as well. Xavier McKinney. It seems like the Eagles are making a push there. Haven't heard as much Bryce Huff stuff yet. It was expected, I call this Mike McCartney Day because Kirk Cousins is going to make his decision relatively soon. That's his agent. And I think he'll go to Atlanta, and that'll kind of shake up the quarterback market. Yeah, interesting day for the Eagles already, though. And it started, as you mentioned, with Landon Dickerson getting the extension, which was expected. That there was no doubt the Eagles weren't going to get it done. But I think you see some of the eye-popping numbers early on, and you see the rise in the salary cap, and that's what happens.
Yeah, and you see the report came out that the Eagles did try and re-sign DeAndre Swift. Now, I'm not an NFL insider. You're an NFL insider. How much does the timeline play into this, right? Like, if the Eagles went to DeAndre a week ago and tried to get him done, I know we heard some rumblings last week. The Eagles are in on Saquon Barkley. I can't imagine they would have been in on both of those guys. Maybe they started to shift their mindset toward a new option when DeAndre opted to not re-sign. Is that how you would see it playing out?
Not necessarily. The Barkley stuff started pretty early, and I think really came from the New York side. And it became clear that the Eagles were interested. You have to have contingency plans. If you don't have contingency plans, you're going to be left up a creek, so to speak. So the Eagles, have multiple options at each position they're looking at. The fact that they tried to sign DeAndre before the legal negotiating period started indicates that he was still number one, which is a little bit of a surprise. But yeah, I don't think I think a lot of people assume that because he's from Philly, he would want to come back. I don't think if that was necessarily the case because of how things went last year.
Got to cash in on the money while he can, John.
Yeah. Plus, the Eagles probably came back to him and said, "Yeah, but we have a different offensive coordinator. We're going to have a different offensive scheme." And but Chicago came through with numbers as well, and DeAndre's in Chicago.
One last question, John. We talked about Landon Dickerson to start the show and his massive contract extension. Now the highest paid guard in the National Football League, ahead of Quentin Nelson. The other guy from that class, Devonte Smith. What's your projection? I'm sure Howie's not going to let him get out the door, obviously. Does it come down this offseason? And what do those numbers look like?
Well, timing, and that's what I said, because Devonte is a first-round pick, that the Eagles have the 50-year option. So they have more time to deal with Devonte Smith, and they'll probably take advantage of that time a little bit, unless Devontae's willing to take something that's really undervalued, which I wouldn't recommend from his standpoint as well. So
yeah, and I wonder too how the market change. I mean, you got guys like Justin Jefferson on the market.
Yeah, you want to wait if you're Devonte Smith.
Right.
Not that you're going to get Justin Jefferson money, but you want to wait for all those dominoes to fall,
right,
and see how high that market wants to go. But the Eagles Eagles fans don't have to worry, because the Eagles have the 50-year option on Devonte Smith. So they have far more time with him, essentially an extra year, than they do with Landon Dickerson. So it'll get done. There's no concern that he's going to be leaving. But from Devonte Smith's standpoint, yes, you want to wait for Justin Jefferson to set the market, and it's going to explode when he signs his deal. So he's not going to be angling for an extension anytime soon.
So we'll see how that plays out.
And if he does, by the way, the Eagles will jump quickly, because they know they'll get a deal.
I believe it, and it'll be interesting to see how the wide receiver dynamics play out on the team. I mean, I love A.J. Brown, but I don't anticipate the team's going to have two, 20 million plus wide receivers.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's going to be tough, but remember, the cap keeps going up. It went up extensively. It's going to go up extensively again when the new TV money kicks in. I will just say that, for those who really want to get rid of AJ quickly, he's the best player the Eagles have, man. I mean, the best pure football player the Eagles have. I'm not ready to move on from AJ Brown just yet.
Yep, I'll agree with you there. John, that'll do it for Football 24/7. A lot breaking, a lot of stuff coming out on the fly as the legal tampering period just started. I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot this week, and we'll see how everything shakes out. But the topic of the show, Landon Dickerson signs a massive 4-year, $84 million extension. Pretty remarkable money there for the guard who, a lot of people questioned when he was coming into the league. So pretty good stuff for Landon.
Yeah, and second year in a row, as I said, an Eagle out the door first. TJ Edwards last year, this year, DeAndre Swift is number one.
Yeah, Ryan Poles is watching this Eagles roster like a hawk.
Same team,
he?
Yes. DeAndre Swift to Chicago. We'll see about the Saquon Barkley stuff. Xavier McKinney, Bryce Huff. Exciting day.
A lot of stuff going on in the NFL, a lot of stuff going on with our Philadelphia Eagles. Tons of holes to fill, tons of roster spots, and now we're on the look for a new running back, number one. So we'll see how it all plays out. John, thank you. Listeners, please drop us a like and a subscribe so you can stay tuned and stay up to date on all the Eagles free agency news as it breaks over these next couple days, and we will catch you on the flip side.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.